Hey, it's Megan Weaver. I'm a photographer for fashion and lifestyle bloggers and women entrepreneurs. Today I want to give you 3 important tips that you can use to improve your blog's photography. In my experience, after shooting with over 100 bloggers, if I don't get the lighting right the first time, it's really hard to save the image, even in editing. So here are the 3 lighting tips that I have that you can use for shooting with products or portraits. If you're shooting portraits, the best time of day is going to be in the morning, a couple hours after sunrise, or later in the day, a couple hours before sunset, and that's also known as golden hour. The reason the light is better during these times is because the light is much softer, so you avoid having really harsh shadows and really harsh light on your model's skin or their clothes. One of my favorite ways to shoot during sunset is to put my model's back facing towards the sun, and that's also known as backlighting. The reason I do this is because it gives a bright background and the front of her face and body is going to be really evenly lit and consistent. Now, it's not everyone's shooting style, but I really love it, and it's something you can try on your next shoot. So now we know when the best times of day to shoot are, but what about lighting situations to avoid? Tip number 2 is to avoid bad lighting conditions. There are countless bad lighting situations you can get yourself into on a shoot, but let's talk about 2 common ones that you can avoid. Situation 1 is shooting in spotty lighting. An example of this would be shooting under a tree. And you want to avoid doing this, especially on a sunny day, because there's going to be spots of light coming down on your model as well as shadowy areas. And what you want to do is try to create consistent lighting on their face and on the entire front side of them. So you want it to be consistent and not really blown out parts and not really dark parts, because that's just going to make it really hard to edit, and it's also really distracting in a photo. So before you even pull out your camera, make sure that the area you're shooting in is completely consistent and that there's not half sun and half shade that you're shooting in, because that's just going to create problems and make it really tricky to shoot. Situation number 2 is shooting in overhead sunlight. This will most likely be between 10 and 11 in the morning and 1 or 2 in the afternoon, depending on the time of year. But again, you want to avoid shooting during this time because it's going to be hard to get consistent light on your model, and the light will be much more harsh in general. If the sun is coming straight down on your model's face, it may create hard shadows under their eyes and nose and just not be extremely flattering. It could also blow out parts of their clothing or their skin, which again will be really tricky to fix. Here's how I fix the problem of having to shoot during the middle of the day, because it does happen sometimes. One option is finding a tall building that you can shoot on the shaded side of. Another thing I do is find a large covering outside in a park or something and shoot under that, since there's also consistent lighting there. And you're still going to have enough ambient light since it's during the middle of the day, which is the brightest time. So we've covered good and bad lighting situations for shooting portraits, but what about shooting products? Tip number 3. Take note of the best indoor lighting during the day before you shoot your products. When I shoot inside, either for Instagram or if I'm shooting for my clients, I always use natural light, and I use whiteboards to reflect that light and get the correct exposure. So I would recommend finding the place in your house that's the brightest, and that's usually going to be either a large door or a large window that you could shoot next to. For me, the best place to shoot is in our dining room, because there's a huge window that I can use, and all I do is just set up the products right next to that window. And our window faces east, so I know that the best time for me to shoot products is during the early to mid-morning, because that's when the light is the brightest and it's the cleanest, versus shooting later on in the day when it gets a little bit darker and a little more orange, just because it's closer to sunset. So your first step is to find the area that's brightest in your house. Second, you want to note the time of day when it is the brightest, so you're prepared and you know kind of how much of a window you have to shoot all the products, depending how many you have. Lastly, if it's really sunny, all you need to do is turn up the blinds just enough so that there's no harsh lines and shadows coming down on your products. If it is cloudy outside, that's okay. You can just open the blinds completely and the light will still come in and it'll be really even and diffused. So don't worry if it's not super bright, you can just open the window and use the lighting that's already there. Once you know these three things, you can use whiteboards from your local craft store and use them as a backdrop or reflector boards to get the correct lighting. And you do this simply by positioning one board opposite of the window. If you want to, you can use two boards on either side of the product. And these boards will basically just reflect and bounce that light back onto your product so that there's no shadows around the edges. So let's recap. Tip number 1 is to shoot during the best time of day for portraits. And that's either the first couple hours in the morning or the last 2 before sunset. Tip number 2 was to avoid bad lighting situations like spotty lighting and shooting with harsh overhead lighting. 3 was to take note of when the best light is in your house if you're shooting products for your blog or for Instagram. I really hope that these tips were helpful, and I want to challenge you to use them on the next shoot for your blog. And if improving your own photography skills is something that you are committed to in 2016, I want to invite you to join my online photography class for bloggers called The Basics of Shooting for Your Blog. This class is for you if you're a fashion or lifestyle blogger who wants to learn how to shoot in manual so you can create gorgeous images for your blog and Instagram. I'll also be teaching things like composition tips to make any photo better, styling and shooting products, and I'm going to show you a behind the scenes look at my camera and how I shoot and focus in manual, which is what I do 100% of the time. So you'll get to see how aperture, ISO, and shutter speed all work together and how they create the correct exposure. I'll be offering an early bird rate that will only last for a week. So if joining this class is something that you know you want to do, make sure you join before the end of the week. After that day, the price will go up for good. To find out more about the online class and to join immediately, click the link directly below this video. I hope to see you in the class, and I'm looking forward to helping you improve your own photography.